The common understanding suggests that the black crack formed over eons.
Scientists at the prestigious American Museum of Natural History in New York City taught that black people were not human.
Bismuth is one of the chemical elements with the symbol of Bi and is number 83.
And they found out that human diversity didn't start till about 5,000 to 10,000 years ago.
Good evening and welcome to the Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and coming up on tonight's show, we'll explore a disturbing but little known part of evolutionary history. Dr. Carl Werner is here to expose how some of the most influential evolutionary scientists spread falsehoods, racism, and misinformation, shaping generations with dangerous ideas masked as science. Then we'll investigate the origin of the human language. A new study claims evolution of the human language evolved about 135,000 years ago. But Dr. Jeff Tompkins will show why the Bible and the genetics tell a very different story, pointing us back to the Garden of Eden and to the Tower of Babel. But first, recently, a striking photo of Utah's black crack has been circulating on social media, capturing the attention of many curious minds. This geological marvel, located within Canyonlands National Park, features a deep fissure that plunges nearly 65 feet, and it reaches widths of almost 3 feet in some places. Now, such a phenomenon prompts questions about, well, how did it form? Yet the prevailing narrative often attributes its existence to millions of years of geological processes, a time frame that is used to support evolutionary theory. The common understanding suggests that the black crack formed over eons through marine transgressions and regressions that layered limestone and then sandstone and then shale. Erosion, tectonic activity, and freeze-thaw cycles are cited as all of these major contributors to the crack's development. Well, according to this view, wind and water gradually wore away the surrounding softer rock layers, leading to the creation of this fissure. So tectonic activity, including uplifts and faultings, is said to have added stress to the rocks, resulting in the formation of these cracks and fissures. Finally, chemical and physical weathering processes have shaped the black crack, making the rocks more vulnerable to erosion. While the scientific explanation is not entirely inaccurate, it is incomplete, let's put it that way. The reality is that we cannot definitively determine how much time a crack like this is needed to form. Many scientists have suggested, well, millions of years, yet catastrophic events or drastic climate change could have just as easily sped up the process. When we look at the black crack from a biblical perspective, we find a strong reminder of God's sovereignty and the order that He established in creation. Psalm 95 actually emphasizes the greatness of the Lord, stating, "In His hands are the deep places of the earth." This verse encourages us to think about the idea that geological features don't require vast epochs to exist, but instead, many times they can be explained much more logically and scientifically with catastrophic processes. Many people assume that the formation of rock layers takes millions of years, a belief deeply rooted in geological education and public understanding. However, compelling evidence suggests that rocks can form rapidly under specific conditions, supporting the idea of a much younger Earth. An article from our friends and colleagues at the Institute for Creation Research provides 4 key pieces of evidence that challenge the belief in ancient sedimentary rocks, often used to reinforce the timeline of evolution. Firstly, current erosion rates suggest that if rocks were millions of years old, well, we would not see them at the surface today. Studies show that rocks wear away at about 40 feet every million years, meaning that most continents would have disappeared long ago if there hadn't been any tectonic uplift. Now, tectonic uplift occurs when large chunks of the Earth's surface move and collide, causing certain areas to rise and form mountains or elevated land, which is especially evident in places like eastern North America, where we don't see much evidence of uplift. But secondly, the formation of shale and limestone, once thought to happen slowly, is now understood to occur rapidly in moving water. And guess what? This type of stone is the very stuff found at the Black Crack. Recent studies show that laminated clays and carbonate mud can accumulate very quickly in energetic environments, contradicting the idea that, hey, these layers formed over long eons and vast periods. Now, thirdly, when we examine sedimentary rock layers, those are sediments or usually water-lane layers, we find very little evidence of the long time gaps that secular geologists claim should exist between them. The boundaries between those layers are flat and smooth, one on top of the other, which indicates that they were deposited quickly rather than worn away over a long time. Lastly, seismic tomography has discovered cold pieces of oceanic crust deep in the Earth's mantle, which challenges the idea that plate tectonics move slowly. So these findings suggest that the plates moved quickly, similar to what could have happened during a major catastrophic event like the biblical flood, historically taking place about 4,500 years ago. The geological evidence collectively suggests that the Earth is significantly younger than anticipated, and it's much younger than the antiquated uniformitarian science previously believed, which, surprise, surprise, that aligns closely with biblical accounts. The data indicates that both the rocks and the fossils do not show the age that one would expect if the Earth were truly millions of years old. Therefore, as we reflect on the mysteries of natural phenomena like the Black Crack, we're reminded of God's creative power and the potential for rapid geological changes that would create fissures like this in a world shaped by divine purpose. I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. Is there such a thing as a sure proof that God is real, that creation is true, and that we can believe the Bible?
We have a fixed amount of energy and matter in this universe. But if the universe had a beginning, naturally, everything had to have come from nothing.
Wow.
Which is the most immense violation of the first law that you could imagine.
On wonders without number. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. Welcome back to the report. It is now time to tackle a viewer question in our Genesis Science Q&A. This week's submission comes from @YECBIB on YouTube, who asks, "I've heard a few different takes on the pre-flood canopy. Curious what you guys think." Thanks for the question. Let's talk about the pre-flood canopy for a moment. This is basically the idea that in the Genesis account of creation, it says that God separated the waters in the seas with waters above the firmament. So there are questions that we have to ask ourselves, because the firmament, or the rachia in Hebrew, is the Hebrew word for firmament, seems to indicate an expanse, but there are multiple expanses. There is a firmament in which birds fly, so that would be like air, like our atmosphere potentially. There is a firmament in which there are celestial bodies. Think space, where stars and galaxies and nebulae and planets are. So there are multiple expanses. The question is, this separation of waters above the firmament with those below the firmament, where do they lie? Some have suggested that perhaps there was a canopy of water above our atmosphere, that maybe this actually had something to do with where the waters, when the windows of heaven were opened during the flood, came from. Others believe that perhaps it was a thin shell of water in some form or another, perhaps vapor, who knows, at the outer edges of the universe. And perhaps this is where we get some of the signals that we consider to be the cosmic microwave background radiation from. One way or the other, there are a lot of theories on what it means by the waters above. And while I don't take a strong stance on this issue, I tend to believe that there's an indication that there could have been a stretching of the heavens, including a stretching of this thin layer of water above the firmament that we would consider space. It's kind of interesting. I think more data will tell us more as science progresses, but that's my thoughts on the issue so far. Now, we do love connecting with our viewers, so remember to keep these questions coming. You can always share them with us on social media. And also remember, you can email them to comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Speaking of the flood, be sure to check out this week's featured resource, the Ark and the Darkness documentary, which shows how geology, paleontology, the fossil record, history, volcanism, and earth science are all pointing to Noah's flood. All of these scientific fields converge on one simple truth. Without a doubt, Noah's flood, it actually happened. It's a real historical event. Now, many people are familiar with an account of the Great Flood that has been known for over 4,000 years. It's been undoubtedly preserved in ancient writings from nearly every major culture around the world. Many have claimed that it's just a myth that's perpetuated. It passes from culture to culture. However, recent discoveries are confirming what the Bible has said all along. A nearly 2-hour-long film, you'll see cutting-edge animation as well as expert interviews in The Ark and the Darkness, now available on digital downloads or DVD. You can watch this film by visiting the Creation Superstore at creationsuperstore.com. And now it's time for the Kids Corner. Have you ever seen a metal that forms colorful, stair-stepped crystals? Well, this shiny, heavy specimen is called bismuth, and it might surprise you to learn that it's actually used in medicine. It even shows up in your own home. This is a specimen from our Wonders of Geology collection here in the Wonder Center and Science Museum. I love this. It's so beautiful. It's heavy like lead, and it has an unusual stair-stepped crystal pattern that you could probably see as I tilt it right here. Now, if it was finely ground up and mixed with liquid, would you drink this? Well, actually, you may already have, because this is bismuth, and it is actually the biz in Pepto-Bismol and many other medications. Now, unlike lead, which is highly toxic, bismuth can actually be consumed inside these types of medications. Bismuth is one of the chemical elements with the symbol of Bi and is number 83 on a chart of elements. It is a metal, and it's heavy, and it's unusual that it actually slightly expands when it's cooling after being melted, whereas other cooled metals, they typically shrink. Other unusual properties of bismuth include being anti-magnetic, and it does not conduct heat or electricity very well. Not only is bismuth used in some medications, but it's also used in some cosmetics, in some pigments, and to create type for printing. It's also been used in some ammunition as a substitute for lead. Since lead is highly toxic and bismuth is not, it's now used in many different applications as a substitute for lead. And this that I'm holding is actually a grouping of lab-grown crystals that is formed from purified and melted bismuth. It creates these beautiful structures that you can see. The heat used in the process causes bismuth to have this iridescent, multicolored surface, which is just so spectacular. Now, crystals of bismuth do not occur naturally, since it's usually found mixed with other minerals. But after the bismuth has been purified and melted at about 520 degrees Fahrenheit, the cooling of the metal naturally forms these intricate, those colorful stair-stepped square boxes that you see. So our Creator has truly blessed us with a very wide range of naturally occurring minerals that are available to us for an unlimited range of purposes. Not only are these materials useful, they can also be very attractive with a wide range of colors and crystal forms. This is yet another piece of evidence that shows how our Creator not only enjoys variety and beauty, but is also pleased to share it with you and me. Now, coming up, Dr. Carl Werner exposes the dark side of evolutionary history, from racist claims to deliberate misinformation. You'll want to hear this eye-opening conversation about what's been left out of the textbooks, so stay with us. The birds of the air, they were created by God in the beginning, but they are so diverse right now. He is being handed this magnificent creature.
This bird is designed. He is chock full of design. This doesn't just happen. He'll fly over your head and he'll land and you can't hear a thing.
Is that right?
It's incredible. God thought of everything when He made them.
On Wonders Without Number. I want to thank you for supporting GSN this year. Your support is helping us send this broadcast to millions of households around the globe. You know, in a society where the theories of Darwinian evolution are bombarding our youth via schools and universities and through peer pressure, we need to saturate the airwaves with the truth of real biblical science, and you are making this happen. Your one-time, monthly, or generous end-of-year tax-deductible love gift keeps this network streaming 24/7 at no cost to our viewers. Thank you for your support. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Is there a biblical view of animal rights?
We've actually got a report that was in one of our British newspapers a little while back. Don't kill mosquitoes, let them take blood donation. Now here's a great example of being futile in your thinking, right?
Right.
At what point should we be looking after animals? At what point should we be treating animals as if they were humans? So it's a really popular topic.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. The mainstream media often portrays Christians as being ignorant, closed-minded, and bigoted fools who disseminate falsehoods and misinformation. Well, in stark contrast, secular scientists are often portrayed as being accurate, unbiased, purveyors of truth. But what if, in fact, the evolutionist scientists are the bigots, the closed-minded, and the racists who are disseminating incendiary misinformation to the public? Well, our guest today Dr. Carl Werner is an expert in the history of the theory of evolution, and he's documented dozens of examples of scientists disseminated basically bigoted falsehoods and providing the public with misinformation. Now, he documented these actions in his just released Human Evolution book and video entitled Untold Stories of Human Evolution, available at the Creation Superstore. Now, he has enough examples to fill our entire show, but we're going to just talk about a few today. Dr. Werner, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Great to be with you.
It is great to have you back. Okay, so you have many examples of bigoted evolution scientists disseminating this misinformation, you say, in your book and in the video series. Can you tell me about one of these?
Yeah, scientists at the prestigious American Museum of Natural History in New York City taught that black people were not human, but were ape men. From the 1920s to the 1960s, over 1 million people saw their museum displays, magazine articles, and other publications portraying black men as the evolutionary animal between apes and the white man.
Wow.
The museum display that I'm referring to was featured in Life magazine, in the science magazine Natural History, and in a science book. All of this, David, was bigoted, racist, and contributed to the discrimination against blacks in the United States. And most amazingly, this display was not taken down until the 1960s. You can see the racial displays in these magazine articles in Volume 4 of the Grand Experiment series.
Okay, so Carl, we're talking about a society that is perpetuated based on science. They called it science, perpetuated this idea. It actually started many, many years prior when Charles Darwin traveled down through the islands of the Galapagos. He's rounding the corner of certain other of South America. He's going to other islands. He's seeing all of these different people groups everywhere he goes, all with different characteristics and different shades of pigment in their skins and all of these things. And then he is literally writing in The Descent of Man, in one of his most famous works, he's writing things about how these people are savages, how they're just a lower step in an evolutionary ladder. And scientists took that to heart. You, in the medical field, medical doctors began to take those messages to heart and said, well, that must be science, so here's how we have to look at all of life. And then all of a sudden, those things began to perpetuate further and further out into communities and completely destroy our view of all human life as being very, very special, created in God's image. So it wasn't the Christians who were bigots. It was actually these evolutionist scientists, and all of this contributed to systemic racism in the United States because those considered blacks were not allowed to use the same bathrooms or the same schools or the same drinking fountains and hotels as those who were labeled white. They were denied equal status in the armed forces. They were suppressed in different ways. And we're seeing this as an example of something that started as scientific research and then took hold of the public. Do you have another example for us, Carl?
Well, as you said, Charles Darwin was a leader of the evolution movement until his death. And in his book, The Descent of Man, he proclaimed that black people were inferior, so inferior they would one day go extinct, which is laughable. After Darwin died in 1882, Dr. Ernst Haeckel in Germany became the recognized leader of the evolution movement throughout the world. And Haeckel was a bigot and a racist, somewhat like Archie Bunker in the sitcom All in the Family, but worse. Haeckel said Jews were inferior and the world needed to rid themselves of them. Haeckel trained many of the Nazi scientists and biologists who would later go on to carry out the Holocaust. And Haeckel also promoted the blacks, Asians, and other non-white people were ape men. He created drawings of black people with a chimpanzee-like snout. He said people with black skin were not humans but were of a different species, Homo niger. And he said Australian Aborigines were not human, but were of the species Homo australis. And Chinese people were Homo flavus. The American Indians were Homo americanus. all this was wrong. We know today genetically that all races of humans are Homo sapiens, which is quite obvious.
Yeah, and it should be quite obvious. There's a tiny characteristic or adaptive differences between all people groups around the world. But you mentioned Haeckel. Isn't he the same guy that put gill slits on humans and gill slits on all of these other things and said, well, this is, and then put them in textbooks for students to read and to see these compelling pictures of embryos of all of these different animals that are supposedly having gill slits, and therefore means that they all crawled out of the ocean at one point. Is this the same Ernst Haeckel?
Yeah, and he did 50 frauds, by the way, true frauds, where he changed the diagrams. And I learned his fraud, and that's why I believed in evolution in medical school. I learned the gill slit thing. I was so mad when I found out that it had been disproved 100 years earlier, but the professor still taught it to me as fact.
You know, that's one of the things that we have to be careful about is once something becomes established science, it's really, really hard to go back on that. And again, science should be about thinking outside the box, about going wherever the evidence leads us, about learning new things. But when something becomes established, when it hits a textbook, well, that textbook, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to print that textbook. So why don't we just leave it in a little bit? And then when it's time to revise, well, is it really so bad? I mean, goodness, we'll just try to deal with that when it comes. In the meantime, millions of students, of medical students, of all of these other biology students in universities are learning it as fact, and they're being influenced, which is extremely dangerous. It's not where science is heading at Genesis Science Network and on the Genesis Science Report. We believe in real science. So, Carl, give me one last example of a prominent leader in the field of human evolution that continued to spread some type of misinformation.
Okay, in the 1950s, the New York Times portrayed Dr. Raymond Dart, who found the first Australopithecine fossil, as an objective and an accurate and non-biased scientist, but he too was a bigot and a racist. Dart taught that black people were ape-like, and they walked bent over. He falsely created diagrams showing the pelvis bones of living black people were similar to the pelvises of ape-like Australopithecines, which of course is not true. His ideas contributed to apartheid in South Africa, which separated the blacks and the white. Again, you can see all these false diagrams in volume 3 and 4 of my book series.
Yeah, and you know, and we've had you on the program in the past talking about things like Lucy or talking about other types of creatures. Here at the Wonder Center and Science Museum, right now, we have people walking into the wonders of human anatomy where we contrast the difference between ape-like creatures like chimpanzees and humans, and there is a vast difference, and there is a lot of genetic difference, more than is being perpetuated. Tell me just a little bit about the myth of the 99% or 98% similarity of DNA.
Well, even if it was 99%, that's still 170 million letters of DNA difference between a chimp and a human. That doesn't sound like a very close relative. 170 million letters of differences. Also, apes have 48 chromosomes, we have 46. And apes have 4 hands and we have 2, So there are so many differences between apes and humans, but the evolution scientists want to make humans into apes. Yeah. And they will not stop with this illogical line of reasoning. It's all wrong.
And Carl, finally, can you kind of bring this home when it comes to our condition of, well, hey, yeah, I have a worldview, and that worldview states that all humans were created in God's image, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. It makes all human life valuable. It doesn't make some people closer to apes than others. Talk about the Christian worldview for a second.
Yeah, the Christian worldview is that we started, which is correct, with Adam and Eve, and that all races descended from Adam and Eve, and that every human being living on this earth, from Timbuktu to Australia, is our brother, both spiritually and physically. And there is no difference. And you can tell there's no difference because the different races can interbreed with one another. The evolution scientists should have seen this. They knew that the races could interbreed, which is the sign that they're the same species, but they just missed it.
They missed it all because of a doctrine, a pseudoscience, a supernatural origins theory that somehow, given enough time, an amoeba will turn into an astronaut. This evolutionary theory has been perpetuated for far too long, and it is time that we do something about it. Carl, you're doing something about it. You have created a book and video series that I would highly recommend. Thank you so much for being here today, for sharing this with us, and I look forward to having you back again and again in the future.
Thank you, Dave.
Guys, you need to get a hold of Dr. Werner's new books and videos on human evolution, but even more importantly, I need you to teach your children creation because they are being spoon-fed an evolutionary doctrine. You can use Dr. Werner's 4-semester creation curriculum to do this. All of his materials are available in the Creation Superstore, creationsuperstore.com. We have to teach this information to the next generation. We have to prevent them from being deceived into believing that this theory of Darwinian evolution, of universal common descent, that everything commonly descend from one universal origin, from a life that's spontaneously generated, is somehow scientific, because it's not scientific. We have to keep the next generation from being taught that the Bible is just a made-up story, because when the professor says that, they don't give anything to back it up. They say, you can't believe the Bible. All you need to believe is what I'm telling you, these theories, and they don't give you any data to back that up. It's actually quite the opposite. The theory of evolution is a made-up fantasy. The account of creation contains many facts and historically based data. Dr. Carl Werner's research pulls back the curtain on some of these darker chapters of evolutionary history that many times they're left out of the textbooks. Truth matters, and when we know the truth, we are better equipped to challenge false ideas that come up with confidence. Now it's time for a quick break, but we're going to be back with a lot more on the Genesis Science Report. Limestone, we see it all around the world, but what is it exactly? And how did it get here?
But let's delve a little bit into limestone. This was found by our good friend John Mackay, our mutual friend John Mackay, a few years back, right? He was driving through the Peak District and he shouted, "Stop!" And he said, "I've seen limestone." And the driver was like, "We're in the middle of the Peak District. It's all limestone around here." No, I found some special limestone.
On Wonders Without Number.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. We are are back, and it's time to hear from you, our viewers. Our first viewer voices submission tonight comes from Kenneth Unger on Facebook. He says, I have spent over 60 years in ministry and am now retired. I appreciate what your ministry is doing and have found it very educational. Thank you so much for that, Kenneth. What we have seen over the last about 16 years of ministry has been truly phenomenal. We've been able to break down some of these scientific concepts and then to an extreme layman level, something that sometimes PhDs are talking about, and then we take that, we help you to understand it, but then we also do something very, very unique, and that is, how does it relate to our Christian life? What can we take away from these scientific discoveries? That's what the Genesis Science Report is all about. Our second testimonial comes from Sharon Thomas, who had this to say after visiting the Wonder Center. Highly recommend this place. Went this week with my 5- and 7-year-old grandkids, and they loved it. Thank you so much, Sharon. We appreciate that feedback. Now, if you've been impacted by the work this ministry is doing, I want to hear from you. You can connect with us on social media or email comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Up next, we are looking at one of the strangest planets in our solar system. On this week's Genesis Science Minute, we'll explore the mysterious, tilted world of Uranus. Let's take a look right now. The seventh planet from the Sun, Uranus has an atmosphere composed mostly of hydrogen and helium. Its temperature dips to extreme lows of minus 370 degrees Fahrenheit, making it the coldest planet in our solar system. Probably one of the most unusual features of the planet is its 97-degree axial tilt. This means that Uranus in its orbit appears to roll around the Sun like a giant ball. In addition, it has a strong magnetic field, which is set at an angle quite different from the rotational axis. Aurora are seen on Uranus just as we witness on Earth, caused by charged solar particles entering in through magnetic poles. The planet was visited by the Voyager 2 spacecraft in 1986. Even so, much mystery remains about this strange blue giant. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com, davidrives.com.
One more interesting thing, I just actually wrote an op-ed for this. You can probably check social media and find it. But Uranus was discovered by William Herschel, a famous astronomer. But the famous astronomer actually started out studying music. That was his chief passion. And then realized that, wow, everything, like God's creation is incredible. There's so much within music that points to math. There's so much in math that points to the idea that there must be another planet out here. So let's go look for it. And this is how Uranus was discovered. And now it's time to jump into this week's ministry report. One of the most mind-blowing episodes that we filmed recently on Wonders Without Number, it was with Dr. Joe DeWeese, a brilliant biochemist who has an incredible gift for making complex science understandable and exciting. In this program, we sat down to explore some of the most intricate biological systems inside every living cell, systems that reveal a level of complexity and interdependence that can only point to intelligent design, not to chance processes. Dr. DeWeese walked us through real-world research in genetics, molecular biology, and biochemistry, showing how the deeper we look inside the cell, the more we find systems within systems, all depending on each other to function. Rather than giving you a long explanation here, let's go to a short clip from our conversation.
Let's take the case of if we just want to make a protein. What do we need to do to make a protein? All right, we've already kind of listed some of these components, but we obviously need amino acids. Those are the building blocks. So we have 20 different types of amino acids in general. There's a couple extras, but in general there's 20. And those are used, put together in certain orders to build proteins. So they make long chains that can fold into three-dimensional shapes. Well, so I've got to have the amino acids. I've got to have the information to know what order to put them in. That's the messenger RNA.
Okay.
I've got to have, in addition to that, I've got to have additional RNA that's used to make the protein. We call that ribosomal RNA. And in addition to this, I got to have transfer RNAs, which are delivering the amino acids to the ribosome so it can build the correct order.
Wow.
But not only this, there's another challenge because the amino acids and the tRNAs have to be properly paired up, because the tRNA is like an adapter. it's translating between the nucleic acid language of the RNA and the protein language of the actual amino acid chain. And so we've got to attach those together. But in order to attach them together, you have to have another enzyme that grabs the right amino acid and the right tRNA and pairs them up. And then, of course, you got to have energy on top of that. So just a few things, to put together, something like a protein. So this is an RNA chain. An RNA chain is a sequence of nucleotides that are linked together. In this case, they're what we call ribonucleotides, and that just has to do with the sugar. So usually we talk about DNA, it's deoxyribonucleotide. Ribonucleotides have a hydroxyl where one is missing, so an oxygen and a hydrogen where one is missing in DNA. So that's on a sugar group. At any rate, we have these chains of RNA nucleotides that come together. So how do we make that chain? Well, turns out, of course, we need an enzyme, which is made of protein. So RNA polymerase II is an example of one of the enzymes that's used to read the DNA information and build an RNA transcript from that information. So here's we start to see the problem. I've got to have the protein in order to copy the RNA that's used to later make the protein.
But you can't have the protein unless you... Wow. That's a chicken or an egg argument right there, and it is something that we find all over God's creation. That's just a small part of what we discussed, but I encourage you to find the full episode at creationsuperstore.com, where you can explore this and many other episodes of Wonders Without Number, which these programs are a great resource for students, for teachers, for pastors, for parents, or anyone who they want to grow a deeper understanding of how science confirms Scripture. Now, the prayers and generosity of our viewers continue to make all of this possible. Your monthly support helps ensure that we can continue to share the wonders of God's creation with people all around the globe. We invite you to partner with us in ministry by making a tax-deductible contribution. You can visit our website or call 931-212-7990 to donate and learn more about this important work. Now it's time to shift our focus to a canyon that formed in just one day. In this week's Heavens Declare, we will see how Mount St. Helens reshaped the land and our understanding of geology. Let's take a look right now.
I'm here in beautiful Washington State at one of the most important geological sites of the 20th century, Mount St. Helens. Now, this volcano erupted on May 18th, 1980, about 40 years ago. Tragically, 57 people died, and $1 billion worth of property was destroyed in this eruption. Amazingly, over 230 square miles of forest were immediately flattened by the eruption's blast. But standing here a mere 40 years or so later, you'd never know it. This area has recovered and is once again a beautiful wilderness. Now, while the eruption was tragic, it gave geologists a massive amount of first-hand data on the catastrophic effect an event like this can have on geology. Watching one relatively small volcano compared to volcanoes in the past erupt and the incredible changes that it brought to this landscape, well, it really challenges the evolutionary belief that these slow, gradual processes have shaped our planet. Did you know that Mount St. Helens has a mini Grand Canyon? It's said to be about 1/40th the scale of the more impressive Grand Canyon, but they share many of the same features. So here's what happened. You see, Mount St. Helens exploded and 2/3 of a cubic mile of material came sliding down the mountain, and it blocked off Spirit Lake from draining into the Toutle River. But Mount St. Helens was not done yet. You see, 2 years later, it erupted again, and the hot ash melted snow in the crater, creating a mud flow. Now, this mud flow rushed down the mountain, and it carved canyons through all of the material that was deposited 2 years earlier. Some of those canyons were 140 feet deep, and they were carved in just one day. Now, there are even elevated plateaus on either side of the canyon, just like the rims of the Grand Canyon. There are side canyons. There are now small creeks that run through the canyons. Now, if you were to visit the Grand Canyon, you'd see signs saying how it formed slowly as the Colorado River wore the rock away over the past 5 or 6 million years. And yet the Little Grand Canyon, with many of the same features, formed rapidly right before our eyes. The eruption of Mount St. Helens is just a minor catastrophe in comparison to the global flood of Noah's day, recorded in the book of Genesis. This massive geological event and what took place in the aftermath shaped the world as we know it. And Mount St. Helens is just a reminder of what a catastrophe can really do. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
That was a beautiful day at Mount St. Helens. We actually just recognized the 45th anniversary year of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Quite a landmark, and it taught us a lot. Now, after the break, what does the latest genetic research really say about the origin of human language? Well, Dr. Jeff Tompkins joins us to challenge the evolutionary narrative and show how the Bible's account of Babel still makes the most sense today. So don't go anywhere. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists. And on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Welcome back to the report. Language, it's one of the most powerful things that sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. But where did it come from? Well, a recent study claims to have found the answer by looking at small genetic differences across global populations and says that our capacity for speech likely developed about 135,000 years ago, even before humans supposedly left Africa. But what if the story of human language doesn't begin in prehistoric caves, but in the Garden of Eden? Joining me today is a geneticist who's spent years comparing biblical history with the latest genetic research, and what he's found supports the Bible far more than the evolutionary story. Dr. Jeff Tompkins holds a master's in plant science from the University of Idaho and a PhD in genetics from Clemson University. He taught in the Department of Genetics and Biochemistry at Clemson for 10 years before joining the Institute for Creation Research in 2009. Since then, he's published extensively on human genetics and creation science. Dr. Tompkins, we are thrilled to have you back on the show.
It's great to be back.
Yes, sir. Well, Jeff, let's start with the study itself, because this is, I've printed out something from phys.org. what exactly is it claiming about the origin of human language, and how do researchers think that they've measured all of these dates?
Well, this is pretty much a standard fare for the out of Africa type of research that pops up pretty frequently. So the general paradigm is that humans evolved in Africa, since chimpanzees live in Africa. And then after a good bit of evolution, then they supposedly came out of Africa 100,000 to 200,000 years ago and dispersed around the world. But there's two main problems, because when they go back and they use all this genetic data, and that's what this paper did. They looked at 15 other studies and the genetic data from those studies. And but the problem is that they calibrate their models with deep time. They don't look at how populations grow and how fast they grow as far as human populations. But when they do, they come up with actually very young dates. So there was a couple of papers published in 2012. One was in Nature, the other was in Science. And they looked at rare variation in the protein coding regions of the human genome from thousands of people in Europe and North America. And they just basically calibrated their models with real population growth. And they found out that human diversity didn't start till about 5 to 10,000 years ago, which is what the Bible tells us. So, but these out of Africa, these out of Africa studies, they just calibrate stuff with deep time, and it's pretty much, in my opinion, just meaningless. It's very hypothetical, very theoretical. And there's two major problems. And the one is those studies that I just mentioned. Another problem is that we have human fossils outside of Africa. There's some in Southeast Asia that are dated at 1.7 million years old, some in China, 800,000 years old. And these are what we would call, or what evolutionists would call, archaic humans. But what's really interesting is not that long ago, they discovered a human modern, or anatomically modern human vertebra in Israel that they dated at 1.5 million years. So the fossil data conflicts with all this out of Africa stuff, and of course genetic data, when it's done right, also gives biblical timelines.
Right, and of course I've led African family photo safaris to the cradle of humankind. I put that in air quotes, obviously, where the out of Africa theory, is supposedly humans began. But as you're mentioning, you can trace fossils back to Asia with supposedly older dates. There are vast problems with that theory, and you just mentioned that things are coming back to around 5,000 years ago. Civilization is starting. It makes perfect sense. Now, the researchers have based their conclusions on a single nucleotide polymorphism. What in the world is that, and how reliable are they for actually tracing ancient human history?
Well, I don't think it's as reliable as looking at rare variants in protein coding regions, because we know those are true mutations, because over 80% of those actually are not doing anything good. They lead to diabetes, heart disease, and things like that. So those are real mutations. As far as these single nucleotide polymorphisms across the genome, from a biblical perspective, we don't know if that is just built-in variation that was put in Adam and Eve at the beginning of time, or if those are real mutations. There's no distinction there. Yeah. But I'd kind of like to get back to speech. Where does speech come from? Well, speech is built into humans. So children, beginning at about the age of 2 or 3, start speaking. You don't even have to teach them, because they pick it up being around their parents and siblings and people. It's just built in. But you couldn't tell a 3 or 4-year-old to bake a cake, because they have to learn how to do that. Huh. But speech is built in.
Okay,
and in fact, there's.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that is actually very curious, because so when do apes learn to speak?
Well, apes don't speak. Actually, that kind of gets into what I wanted to mention next. So humans are actually built to speak. So we actually have 9 different muscles in the larynx that allow us to speak. So we're built very differently than apes. And we also have, but But not only do you need the physical components, all these different muscles, you know, in your mouth and in your face and in your larynx. And I just mentioned 9 just in the larynx alone. But you also have different parts of your brain that are involved in speech. So you have at least 3 major areas in the brain. You have the Wernicke's area, the Broca's area, and the motor cortex. And so all of this is just built in, and it's impossible for it to evolve from an ape-like creature, because they don't have, you know, the mechanics and the kinds of brains that humans do.
And that's something that a lot of geneticists, a lot of anthropologists, a lot of people have never even thought to stop and consider. So thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Tompkins. Now, from a biblical standpoint, we would say that Adam and Eve existed, that they could speak, but that there were pivotal moments in Earth's history that were key for language in general. How does the biblical view contrast with the evolutionary view?
Well, the biblical view, you know, fits with everything I've just mentioned. So in the beginning, Adam and Eve were created, and they could speak, and they were told they could communicate with God and have fellowship with him, and he would walk with them in the garden, and they could talk to each other. And obviously they talked to the serpent and fell. But basically, there was just one global language after Adam and Eve had offspring and the earth became full of people. They had one language. And then we had the global flood at about 1700 years after creation. And the flood wiped out everyone except Noah and his 3 sons and their wives. But they still had that one language. And then we had the incident at the Tower of Babel, where people, after the flood, after, you know, things were getting repopulated and populations were growing, they disobeyed God and did not go out and spread around the earth and fill the earth like God had told them to do. And so they built this structure, probably some kind of a pagan-like structure, maybe a pyramid-like structure. And God said, okay, I'm going to confuse their languages. And so God confused their languages at that point. And then they had to spread around the earth. You know, you could only marry someone and have a family with someone you can communicate with. And so that was a divine act that really created, you know, all of the basic global languages that are around the world today. And in fact, there was a study that was published that connected phonemes or languages with genomes. And they found out that phonemes and genomes are completely correlated as far as all the different people groups and the dispersal of people around the world. So once again, the biblical data fits science, and you know, you have to believe in a literal Genesis because it's supported by science.
Every time. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes.
Dr. Tompkins, we're completely out of time. I want to thank you for joining us today to help break this article down for us and to understand the biblical implications. I'm going to have you back on a future program.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You know, language is not just a function of biology, but it's evidence of a designer who speaks. From Adam and Eve to Babel to modern day genomes, the more we learn, the more we see that the Bible's history makes sense of the world that we live in. That is it for today. Thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. And until next week, I want to remind you to keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.